In Matthew 13, it said Jesus never talked to anybody without telling him a story. Your stories and the way that you apply what you've learned about faith to what you've learned in your life, that actually has the ability to change people. So I hope that you'll take some of these things and not just go to the people that are easy to talk to, but find the people that are difficult. If you really want a grade on where you're at in your faith, see how you're treating the people who creep you out. I've spent my whole life avoiding the people that Jesus spent his whole life engaging, and here's why. I didn't want to get any on me. And here's the simple message that Jesus came to give: to get it on you. Get it all over you. And you know what? At the end of the day, you'll look just like Jesus. We're sitting in my backyard, and I love this place. There's a whole bunch of reasons I love it, and one of them is that it's actually the Republic of Uganda. I'm not kidding. It looks like it's the United States, but because I'm the Consul General for Uganda and the flag of Uganda flies over my house, it's literally Uganda. I'm the diplomatic mission of a foreign government to the United States. You know what's crazy? If you ever really screw up and need to seek asylum, you can come here because it's not part of America. And here's the crazy part. Even though my house looks like every other house on the block, it's not, because of the flag that flies. And we fly under the banner of Christ. And it changes everything, or it changes nothing. Here's my question. We've spent a couple weeks together. What's all this going to change in you? And what it gets down to, I think, is the way that we love the people that are the most difficult in our life. Let me give you a couple of stories about some people that have been difficult in my life and what I've done about it. We took all the money from the Love Does book and we started building schools around the world, which kind of cracks me up because my worst subject in school was school. But I'm pretty good at starting them. We have them in Iraq and Somalia, Nepal. We've got them all over the place. We've got one in Uganda. There was actually a nonprofit that some young guys had gotten into trouble in Uganda the first week they were there. So I went over to kind of bail them out. And while I was there, I was thinking, well, shoot, I'm a lawyer. Well, what if I go meet some judges? So I headed for the courthouse and I said, hi, my name is Bob Goff and I'm here to see the judge, not knowing who it was. And she said, do you have an appointment? And I said, well, actually, no, but I've just come 18,000 miles from San Diego. And she said, well, one moment, please. And she disappeared behind some doors. And she came out a couple minutes later and she said, the judge will see you now. I tried not to fake total surprise, which is hard for me. So I walked in and there's a guy sitting at the desk. He's got his head down. He looks up at me and he kind of gestures towards a seat. And I sat down, and when he looked up, he said, why are you here? I said, my Lord, I've come a long way. I'm here and I just want to help. And he said, well, let me tell you about what's going on in Uganda. He started telling me more and more about the history of the country. You know who this was? This was the Chief Justice of their Supreme Court. I'm not lying. He wrote Uganda's constitution. And so we started this beautiful friendship. We talked about justice. We talked about Jesus. We talked about kids. Well, we became fast friends, and he actually said, you've visited my office now. I'd love to come and visit yours. Now, I teach a course at Pepperdine Law School, and so everybody who teaches as an adjunct professor at Pepperdine has to have office hours. But get this, they don't say where. So I have mine on Tom Sawyer Island at Disneyland. And so the Chief Justice of Uganda's Supreme Court flew into LAX, and we picked him up, and he said, can we go to your office? I'm like, sure. And we drove past all the high-rises on Wilshire Boulevard. We pulled into Disneyland's parking lot. He's like, you have an office here? I'm like, you should see my pirate ship. And I took him on the Jungle Cruise because I wanted to know what Africa's really like, right? And when we were all done, we went over to Tom Sawyer Island. We had this beautiful conversation. It was about justice It was about Jesus, and it was about kids again. And we finished the conversation by talking about this horrible practice they have in Uganda. And it's not just Uganda, but many countries, and it's child sacrifice. These witch doctors in the country that everybody's afraid of actually sacrifice kids, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these kids every year. But in the history of Uganda, nobody had ever taken on a witch doctor. You know why? They were afraid of them. But we're not afraid of these guys. They're punks. And so I asked the judge, would it be okay if we ever found a victim that survived one of these attacks? Would you let me try a case against them? And the judge said yes. Well, it was back in San Diego, and the phone rang. And I got a call from Uganda. There'd been a little boy. We're just going to say his name is Charlie. He'd been abducted by one of the most vicious, evil men I've ever met in my life. The name of this man is Kabi. Kabi was the head of the witch doctors up in the north. And as Charlie was walking home from school, Kabi abducted him and took him into the bush. The belief in Uganda is that the head or blood or private parts of a little kid have these magical powers. And the problem is this: there's always a victim of these crimes, but they're always dead. And then everybody's too afraid to go after the witch doctors. Well, this little boy had been taken into the bush, and they cut off all of his private parts. But get this, you guys, this kid lived. And for the first time, we had a bad guy who was in jail. We had a victim who was alive. So I flew right back to Uganda. I met with the Chief Justice again, and I said, would you let me participate in Uganda's first death penalty case against a witch doctor? And he said, Bob, I'll let you do it. You will never find a judge who will touch that. And then we did. You know, this judge loved God. He believed that the power of justice in the world, he could have done anything he wanted, but he decided he was going to take a big risk. And when he said he would try this case, a couple witch doctors showed up at his house. People who are willing to put wheels on their faith are willing to take tremendous risks to do that. Not so they'd be the hero, not so they'd be the victim, but so they'd be a participant. And you know, the crazy part is you and I get to do that. We get to just say, what are we good at? I'm a lawyer. I know how to try cases. What is it that you're good at? And go take that around the block for a drive. Again, you don't have to go across an ocean, but say the confluence of our faith is this. It's all the things that God talked about and said we were. Don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out what you do. What are you good at? Where do you have an opportunity? And then what's going to last? And go do that. Well, we decided this trial would last. Kabi goes away to Lizira Maximum Security Prison. It's the scariest place on earth. It was built in 1920 for 200 death row inmates. There's 3,000 men at Lizira. And there's not windows, there's just a place you go to Lizira to die. And the word of this conviction came out and went to 44 million Ugandans. And here was the message: you touch a kid, it's over. Now, the way my world works, there's terrific little kids like Charlie, and then there's people who are evil like Kabi. And I want every awesome thing to happen to Charlie. God loves kids, and he loves justice. But Jesus also said in Matthew 5, love your enemies. And because Kabi was my enemy, I decided to take these promises, these mandates in Matthew 5 about loving our enemies for real. And so I called the warden at Lizira Maximum Security Prison. I let him know I'm the Consul General for the Republic of Uganda, and I wanted to meet Kabi. And I met Kabi inside this dark room in Lizira. And when Kabi came in, he took a knee, and he started telling me about how bad he felt about what he'd done to Charlie. And I was thinking to myself, well, you just feel bad that I caught you. Then he started talking about witchcraft and what it had done in his life. And then his words, not mine, he said, I know I'm going to die in this place. Do you know what I need? I need forgiveness. And I felt like I was talking to a criminal hanging on a cross next to Jesus. You know, the one that Jesus turned to and said, you get paradise. And you know what, you guys? I didn't want Kabi to get in because he hurt my friend. But isn't it terrific that God's ability to forgive us isn't limited by our ability to get it? And get this, Kabi comes to Christ. I'm like, really? Like he's into, I wasn't trying to get him in, I was trying to keep him out. But we don't need to understand everything about forgiveness to get a little. And one of the things that might be keeping you away from this big life that Jesus talked about is that you're just wrapped around the axle being all the earlier versions of you. I know you did something rotten, or you looked at something, or you just got this big secret you don't want anybody to know about. But on your very worst day, on your biggest screw up, you don't want to let anybody know about. Do you know what God calls you? He calls you beloved. And if you're not hearing the words beloved spoken over your shoulder right now, it ain't Jesus talking. I asked the warden, has anybody ever presented the gospel message here on death row? And he said, nobody gets in here. I said, well, Cobby lives here now. Could he do it? And it was like I did this Jedi thing because the warden said yes. And so a couple trips later, Cobby and I held hands in the courtyard of Lazira Maximum Security Prison, and he presented the gospel of Christ to 3,000 dying men. And you know what, you guys? He screwed it up. I've never heard anybody hack the gospel worse than Cobby. I don't think I even believed in Jesus when he was done. I was like, what? He messed it all up. Do you know what he got right was this idea of forgiveness? Man, that's the deal. We're not going to love our enemies until we can receive that for us. And after Cobby said this, all these prisoners started coming towards him. He grabbed a bottle of water and started baptizing them. I'm like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, well, maybe. Shoot. And then you know what Cobby did? He took my hand and he said, Bob, I know I'm going to die in here because of you. Awkward pause. But he said, you know what? I want you to know that I forgive you. I'm like, you can't forgive me. You're the bad guy. But here's the deal. Cobby knows if I'm his enemy, he can't be perfect. And he wants to be perfect. And here's my question. Do you want it bad enough? Do you want it bad enough that you get past all the stuff that keeping you wrapped around the axle? Are you going to actually call somebody up or send them a text message? Ever since the trial, I've been meeting with witch doctors. So when I'm in northern Uganda, I'll send out word on the bush radio that the consul general is in town, and I command every witch doctor to come and meet with me. And you guys, you know what's creepy? They come. I've met with over 1,000 witch doctors so far, and they are creepy dudes. Some of them make little dolls that look like me, and they stick things in it. It's awesome. After one of these meetings with the witch doctors, I asked them, what do you guys need? And they said, you know what? Everybody's afraid of us. I mean, we're the leaders in the community, but nobody wants to hang out with us. I'm like, buddy, I'm a lawyer. I know exactly how you feel. And they said, but we don't know how to read or write. And so guess what? I started a witch doctor school. Don't freak out. Here's the deal. We just teach these witch doctors how to read or write. We've had over 300 witch doctors graduate from witch doctor school. They are creepy graduations. But there's something beautiful that's happening in their life and mine, because the only books they have in witch doctor school to learn how to read and write are the Bible and Love Does. You're reading their textbook. I got a phone call one night. It was probably at midnight. It was from 2 witch doctors at witch doctor school. And they said a little boy's been abducted. They've taken him into the bush for a child sacrifice, but we know where he is. And they asked me, should we go get him? And I'm standing up on my bed in my boxers. I'm like, get the kid! And 4 hours later, I got a text message from these 2 bad guys, these guys that used to be my enemy. And it said this: we've rescued the child. He's with his mother. And the last 2 words of this text message, love does. Man, if we keep our distance from the people that God made, it would be like reading every other page of the Bible and thinking we knew what it said. God made all of us. He made some of us more creepy than others. Instead of trying to figure everybody out, just love everybody. I know it's hard. I get it. I get it. Do it anyway. He didn't say it would be easy, God just said it would work. And so, as we wrap up this time together, what I want you to think about is what are the action steps? So, what's your big next step? And it might be just finding somebody that you're estranged with, somebody that you've really kept your distance from because they wounded you deeply. And there's some people that are just unsafe to be around. So I want you to be smart about how you do this. I want you to take a friend if you need to. Talk to some people that are good at this stuff. But don't let fear keep you stuck. I mean, Satan, I'm sure on the seventh day when God was resting, he said, what if I just distract everybody by having a bunch of opinions and a bunch of people that weirded each other out? I'll keep them all isolated from each other and then arguing with each other. And then they'd be so distracted, they'd never get around to the beauty of seeing what God's doing in their life. And I'll tell you, man, you can do a U-turn on that. You can just take some of these people that have been difficult and engage them. Again, it won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. You guys, thank you so much for spending the last couple weeks doing this study with me. I hope you've learned a ton about your friends by these discussions that you've had. Maybe there's been some times of reflection where you've written a couple things down, kind of like a to-do list, like these might be attributes I'm going to work on. And then find these small waves. Jesus isn't going to think that he's going to take us there all at once, but incrementally. What's your next step to move a little closer to the author of love? And one of the ways that you might move there is to think this, to love everybody always. Thanks a lot, you guys. I'll see you later.
Hello. Can you hear me now? So consider Bob's story in this week's teaching about Cobby the witch doctor. What stuck out to you, touched you, or even inspired you? Oh, the green light's still on. Maybe I just am not loud enough, although I can't hear it. Okay. For me, what inspired me was that after the whole story was all over, he did not have to go back to that prison. I mean, it was all done and over with. The bad guy, got sent to jail, end of story. That wasn't the end of the story for him. He went back for forgiveness, and I want to take a lesson from that. Because I think a lot of the times I do the right thing, but I don't go far enough. I stop, and the Lord gives me gentle nudges to go on further, to do more. And I think, well, I've done everything, but I'll remember this story and remember there's still more. There's forgiveness to be had. There's the end of the story. Anyone else? How you were touched by that story? Does anyone relate to Bob's statement about spending his whole life avoiding the very people Jesus was always engaging? I actually spent his whole life avoiding the very people that Jesus spent his life with. Yeah. Well, Jesus may have hung out with a few criminals. I don't know. So have you ever been someone else's enemy? And do you know why? I think I've been other people's enemies just because of my stupid mouth. I've said so many terrible things and not even realized they were so offensive. I've hurt people and not even, I mean, maybe sometimes I knew, but many times I have not known. And then it's not that I'm unfeeling or spiteful or mean. I'm just have a loose tongue, I guess, because I'm heartbroken when I find out I've offended someone, and yet it continues to happen. John Mayer wrote a song about that. It's called My Stupid Mouth. So apparently I'm not the only one who suffers from that. Anyone else?
So when I started going through Al-Anon, we were the same steps as AA does. Although Al-Anon's for the family and friends, we recognize the things that we've done, and we also make apologies and make amends. And that was one of the things that I did. I took that very seriously. It's like my life is so different now, and I'm going to apologize to you, and I'll completely understand if you don't accept it. But to go ahead and make that apology and make that attempt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My brother was married to a woman that drugged out and did some bad stuff, and years later she came to me at the salon and did that very thing. And I mean, I didn't have any ought, toward her in my heart. My mom and sister did, and she didn't ever go to them. She just came to me. I don't know if if she just would, if you just pick and choose, or if she didn't ever make it through all the steps, or what. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even feel like I was her enemy or she was my enemy. Just an unfortunate situation. Um, is it easier for you to forgive or to receive forgiveness from others? Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. What do you think, Jean? Is it easier to receive forgiveness? I don't know. When I said receive, I pictured people asking me to forgive them, but that's granting forgiveness, isn't it? That's not receiving. Huh. So it would be. It would be asking for it and then receiving it. that's the way it always is for me. When I've done something, most likely said something that was bad enough that I actually, had to go to the person and ask for forgiveness, it is hard for me to, I don't get over it right away. It takes some time. It's like a stain in a shirt or something that takes multiple washings to come out. And it does. I do get over it, but not always right away. Although there have been those times that, I just, walk away feeling so good. Was there anyone else that had a comment on that? Well, what are some healthy precautions to take in dealing with those people who are just unsafe to be around? How can these precautions keep you from being stuck in fear when it comes to approaching them? Well, the Lord doesn't put us all here to do the same thing. He uses different people, like, Jamie that got up here and talked on Sunday about being just, God had him at the right place at the right time when that guy had the wreck. And, Jamie, what is he, like 6'6"? Big old dude. God did not have me in that time and place because, I could have prayed and I would have. But I don't know about pulling a man out of a, burning truck or a truck that's getting ready to burst into flames. But it's the same with Bob, I'm not sure that God would have led me into a maximum security prison in Uganda to talk to a witch doctor. I would have been scared to do that. I'm not sure I would have been so effective. But God sent Bob to do that and made huge waves. Made a huge difference. So I thank God for, Bob being faithful, being obedient.
And the Holy Spirit instructed her to go, and she went. And one of the most beautiful stories was one of the men got saved, and he became her right-hand man in the prison. But he had a death sentence, and when it was time for his execution, he asked her to be there. And she said that was one of the hardest things she'd ever done, is to be to his execution. But if God calls you to go somewhere, He'll take care of you, and He'll give you what to say.
There was a little catchphrase, I'm sure you've heard it, where something about where it means where God leads, He will provide, but it rhymes. Has anyone heard it? Does anyone know that? So basically, if He's telling you to go on a mission trip, He's going to help you. He's going to provide for it. A cute little saying.
If Jared sees a woman that maybe is in need, okay, maybe he comes to me, kind of like being careful when you're dealing with opposite sex type situations.
Yeah, hence little Ronnie in the Ugandan maximum security prison. But yeah, I know that a lot of the times pastors have to be careful when counseling, women in their church. They have to make sure that do things responsibly. So what's the most threatening part of Bob's challenge to just do it when it comes to loving your enemies? The most threatening part? Well, it's hard. It takes a choice. You have to choose sometimes. Well, if it's your enemies, probably every time. Anyone have any thoughts on that one? The most challenging part?
I let myself and
I just wasn't sure if it was the Lord or not. And so, most of the time I wouldn't do something, but there have been times I did. I did go ahead and do it and failed. It wasn't the Lord. And then, then it's embarrassing, and then I'm inhibited the next time. So, that's a challenge. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has been like that, but yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to discern, the still small voice of God, from your own thoughts sometimes. Well, there is a little activity, but I think that I'll skip that little activity. And there's a little something to think about at the end. Use the following questions to close out your time and reflect on the experience of this study as a whole. And I was looking through this before and thinking about it, and I had a hard time coming up with answers right away. But before going through this study, I used to think blank. But now I wonder blank. So fill in the blanks there. And the best thing about this experience was, and the worst thing was, I would say the worst thing was that now we have a responsibility. I mean, as if we didn't before, but and he's shown us practical steps to take toward stepping out. So that was the worst thing, because now we know what to do. We have to do it. Well, you said you used to think that you were giving everything you could, and then God would say, give more. Well, have you ever done yoga? I've been doing some yoga, and that's the way it is. You stretch as far as you can until, you think your leg's going to break off or something. And then you rest for a few seconds and take a deep breath, and as you exhale, you stretch a little deeper, and it's amazing how that happens. I mean, you have stretched as far as you could, but then when you relax, take a breath, more happens. So you're just being stretched, and you were doing as much as you could. You couldn't do any more then. But then, God comes in, and you took a breath. Took a minute. Mm-hmm. Well, when I think about Jesus, praying all the times that the Bible mentions, and you know that the Bible doesn't mention every time Jesus prayed, and he would pray all night long. And I get up in the morning. I say it with that tone of voice. I get up and spend time with the Lord every morning, and it's usually about an hour. And I think I've gotten myself in the habit of it being about an hour. So after an hour, I've kind of run out of things on my heart to pray for. And Jesus would pray all night long, all night. He would spend time with his Father, and so I've thought before, well, when did he sleep? On those nights that he prayed all night, when did he sleep? Did God just make him be able to miss a night and not need sleep? I guess there you go. He was sleeping so soundly, those waves were rocking him to sleep, weren't they? Yes. So I think that I don't get up and spend time with the Lord because I about lost my train of thought. I do it because I want to spend time with the Lord. I don't do it because that's an assignment or a duty or anything. But I would like to spend more time with the Lord. I don't know. Well, I know that I've read books about the Azusa revival, and people would be there all night long praying, all night, and sometimes they'd be slain in the spirit, for hours. And golly, that's just I can hardly even imagine that in reality. I can read about it, but wow, in reality, man. So there's something. There are some goals. Okay, anyone else have anything to add to it? Well, thank you all for coming. Is that right? Well, they always say the book's better. Yeah. Well, let's have a moment of prayer. Let's send you guys home. Lord, I thank you for being here and speaking to us through Bob. And probably for each one of us, it's been a little something different. But I thank you, Lord, that you have caused us to each one hear these messages. And I ask, Lord, that you would cause them to grow in us. And Lord, the main focus of the whole message was to love everybody always. And so, God, I'm sure that is a great desire for each one of us here. And I just bless that. I just bless that in them, Lord, that you would help them love everybody always. And I pray that this has been a seed that you've planted and that will grow and grow in the lives of each of us. And I thank you, Lord, that you do give us the desires of our heart. And let that be a desire of our heart, each one of us, to love everybody always. In your name I pray. Amen.